A full-grown tiger dropped to the ground, eyes locked on the man who stepped into her cage. Unarmed, trembling, whispering her name. For one breathless moment, everyone braced for blood. Instead, she pressed her head to his and purred. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Mike didn't tell a soul. No farewell email, no resignation letter, just a clean desk and a silent goodbye. The last to see him was a junior ranger who noticed him staring at an old photo. Maya, barely the size of a German shepherd, curled beside his boots in the shade of a charred pine stump. Her fur had been patchy then, marred by ash and infection, but her eyes, those eyes, had locked onto his like they already knew something no one else could understand. He drove east, then farther east, a beat-up pickup truck with a camper shell loaded with supplies he'd spent months collecting. Thermal drone equipment, satellite maps, veterinary kits, water filters. Every spare dollar had gone toward it. He crossed the border with forged permits and a passport he hadn't used in years. Through the chaos of international wildlife laws and red tape, Mike moved like a ghost, drawn by a conviction deeper than any duty he'd ever known in combat. What burned in his mind wasn't just the image of Maya's last cry. It was the silence that followed, the sound of something breaking that never quite repaired. He had spent years pretending he could move on, helping other animals, mentoring young rangers, filing reports, but every night she came back. In his dreams, in the pause between conversations, in the quiet rustle of the forest wind, he would see her, full-grown, eyes searching, waiting. In India, he took work under the radar, patching fences, clearing brush, anything to stay close to conservation zones. He changed his name, lived in back rooms, ate when he remembered. Weeks passed, then months. He learned the terrain, studied the patrol rotations, bribed his way into restricted areas. Somewhere inside the Satpura Range, he'd been told, there was a sanctuary with an American-tagged tigress, unusually docile, strangely withdrawn, often pacing along the northern edge of her enclosure where no other cats lingered. The locals called her Bhoot Rani, the Ghost Queen. Mike knew it was her, and he knew what he had to do. But this wasn't some fairy tale of reunion. What waited beyond that fence wasn't just a tiger. It was 5 years of pain, separation, and promises he hadn't kept. The bond they'd forged in the fire? It had never belonged in this world, and now he was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. Rachel stood in the sterile office of the so-called Eco-Conservation Reserve, her eyes fixed on the surveillance monitor. The footage looped silently. Maya, once a proud creature of sinew and grace, now lay coiled in the farthest corner of her enclosure, her ribs drawn like prison bars beneath her coat. Her breathing was shallow, her food untouched. A low, rhythmic motion pulsed through her tail, back and forth, an anxious metronome counting down something invisible. The reserve's manager, a man with a crisp collar and the emotional range of a filing cabinet, explained without a hint of guilt. Some animals just don't adapt. She's not responding to enrichment. Tourists are asking for a different route. She's become unmarketable. He said it like he was describing a broken espresso machine. Rachel didn't answer him. Her mind had already moved far beyond this room, back to what she'd read in the internal reports. Mike's disciplinary file had been bloated with cold phrases, inappropriate familiarity, emotional over-identification, compromised objectivity. But every line had been a translation of something real, something human. She remembered one note in particular, buried in a supervisor's complaint. Subject, Mike, spent the night outside the enclosure during the cub's illness, citing separation anxiety, his or the animal's, unclear. But it was clear to her, crystal clear. Mike hadn't bonded with Maya out of weakness. He'd seen in her something no form or protocol could measure, mutual recognition between two survivors, the same hollow space behind their eyes, the same instinct to fight through fire, not out of hope, but out of refusal to die in silence. When Rachel found him again, it was evening. He sat on a crate behind the reserve's service shed, boots caked in filth, hands blackened from ash and chemical scrub. She didn't speak, just handed him her tablet and pressed play. He watched the footage, Maya dragging herself to the gate each morning, only to stop and stare through the bars, waiting, still waiting. And then, one morning, she didn't come at all. Mike's jaw tightened. His hands trembled slightly, not with rage, something colder, deeper, the kind of pain that grows roots. "She thinks I left her," he finally said, voice hoarse. "She waited, and I didn't come, and now she's stopped waiting." Rachel nodded, her throat tight. "They're moving her out of the country in less than 2 weeks." The words hovered in the air like a death sentence. Mike didn't respond. He just stood, slowly, deliberately. For a long moment he looked past the hills, toward the faint silhouette of the compound, and then he whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "She's not going to die in a cage." The roar of the enclosure gate echoed like thunder against steel walls, but Mike didn't flinch. The world around him, a blur of shouting staff, the clatter of tranquilizer rifles being readied, Rachel's frantic voice in his earpiece, disappeared the moment he saw her. Maya. She was bigger now, 180 pounds of muscle and coiled instinct, her stripes more defined, her presence massive, electric. But in her pacing, Mike recognized the rhythm. Left, right, pause, each step a cry for something she couldn't name. Her coat was matted, her gums pale from sedatives. She moved like a caged storm, erratic and tight-coiled, tail snapping like a whip. Rachel, filming from the safe zone behind the mesh, whispered urgently, "They're prepping the darts. Now or never, Mike." He stepped forward, into the open, into the kill zone. Gasps rippled across the handlers. One cursed aloud, another fumbled with a syringe, hands shaking. A man in a security vest yelled, "Get him back! That tiger will rip him apart!" But Mike wasn't looking at them. He raised one hand, not high, not fast, just enough for her to see, and in a voice steadier than his heartbeat, he said, "Maya, it's me." At first, she didn't stop, but she slowed. Her ears, pinned back moments ago, shifted forward. The whites of her eyes, once wide with frenzy, narrowed. Her tail, still, now. Her breathing, once ragged, softened. And then she did what no one there could have imagined. She folded. Her body sank to the earth, muscles relaxing as if exhaling years of tension. The great tigress laid down, not in defeat, in recognition. A sound emerged from her chest, low, rolling, deep. A chuff, a memory in motion. Not a roar, not a warning, a greeting. Mike's voice broke as he knelt, pressed his hand to the mesh. "Good girl. God, you remember." She rose, slow and graceful, then moved forward. The moment her forehead met his through the fence, gently, deliberately, something broke loose in the air. The space around them became sacred. Time stopped. Cameras clicked. Security froze. Rachel cried. Her eyes closed. A blink, slow, vulnerable, full of trust. And Mike, he wept openly, fingers curled against the mesh, forehead pressed to hers. 5 years vanished. The fire, the separation, the ache. They hadn't erased the bond. They'd only tested it, and it had survived.